So far, we have understood what exactly bottlenecks are. But now I want to show you how exactly can you solve them. Now, before we do that, let's visualize what a bottleneck is. You must have seen such kind of process flows in a lot of places. An example is in traffic or maybe in a queue, etc., where there's an input which is big. There's an output where there is a lot of space to do a lot of things. But in the middle, there is a very small constriction where data gets accumulated together, or where there's a pile up happening, there's a queue being formed. If you simply visualize this as a highway, think about this as a 3-lane highway with one bridge which is a single lane, and then there's a 4-lane highway over here. Now, the problem with bottlenecks is everything on the right side is usually unutilized because there's a lot of space over here, but because there's a pile up happening over here, this part is always empty and it's not being utilized well. And in order to utilize this well, what we need to do is eliminate the bottleneck or make this part bigger. How do we do this? There are multiple ways of doing it. But let's start with solving the entire problem statement from the beginning. So the first process of always solving the problem statement for bottlenecks is identification. And if you try to identify bottlenecks by just trying to find the bottleneck, it might be difficult. Of course, we have mentioned that any types of queues or any types of pylons can result into a bottleneck, but sometimes finding those itself is really difficult. So it's easier to find if you have unutilized resources. For example, if a particular department is extremely free, they have more people than more work than the work that they have, or if probably there is a highway which is extremely open, but regular flow rate it's technically designed for handling the amount of cars that come in, but it's still open. It means that there is a constriction before that. So just finding out unutilized resources will lead to finding a bottleneck. And if you backtrack and reverse engineer, you will most often than not, you will find the bottleneck in the place. So that's the way of identifying a bottleneck. Now, as soon as you've identified a bottleneck, the next goal is to basically find the reason why the bottleneck exists. There could be multiple reasons of bottlenecks being there inside the system. They all can be categorized into 3 parts. The first part is it's a resource problem. Basically, you have limited resources at this point. You have limited number of people who can do the job, or you have limited machines who can take care of that, or you have limited time, etc. But basically, it's a resource limitation. Second problem with the bottleneck could be a skill problem. The people inside this part are highly skilled and nobody else can do the job. And hence, it's again like somebody, because the process includes a high level skill, which is very high in demand, it becomes a bottleneck. And finally, there could be a process problem. Process problem being in a way where there is no streamlined process, or there's a lot of communication gaps. There are inefficient workflows that are happening through the process, due to which the bottlenecks arise eventually. All of these can be seen and identified in a very simple way. But once they have identified and reasoned to put in one of these baskets, there's a way of eliminating those as well. Now, as soon as you figure out which bucket they fall into, the next part that you have to do is you have to go into a detailed reasoning. You need to do like a detailed analysis, understanding of why exactly this arose. What was the problem statement behind it? You need to figure out and interview the people who are involved. You need to interview the people who created a process and structure as well. Once you do that, then we move into the elimination part. Now, for each of the 3, we have different ways of eliminating it. Let's start with the resource. If the resource is a limitation itself, the first thing that you need to do is you need to basically optimize how that resource works, how they do the job that they are supposed to do, which is a bottleneck. So basically figure out what they do on a day-to-day basis and eliminate the things that are not needed, or make the things that they are doing faster. Okay. Then first, as soon as you optimize for it, you need to automate it. So you need to automate as much as possible of their job so that the bottleneck gets removed. And finally, if you can't solve it by any of these methods, then the only way is to hire or employ more resources. So hire more people, add more machines, make this bigger so that the flow rate becomes equalized. Second, if you identify that it's a bottleneck due to a skill, what you need to do is you need to ensure that the skilled labor is doing only the job that they are really skilled for, and the rest of the things are removed. So how do you start? First, you document the SOP. Document what exactly the skilled labor is doing. Figure out all the steps that they are doing and figure out what steps actually need their skill. The other steps can be replaced by labor which is cheaper or with a virtual assistant or automated. Once you do that, start demystifying the SOP. Basically, figure out what they are doing, make it so much simpler for you to understand, for your team to understand, and make it super simple for it to be delegated. And once it's made simpler, don't delegate the things that they are skilled at, but the rest of the things can always be distributed and delegated. So distribute those across people. This also applies for like machines which are really powerful, etc. But ensure that the machines are doing the core work, and don't make them do things which simpler and smaller machines can also do. Similarly, you can just figure out where the skill bottleneck exists. And finally, if there's a process bottleneck. So in case of a process bottleneck, what you need to first identify is what exactly are the input steps. Okay, you need to document the input steps and you need to make it like a structured workflow, because most of the times in the process bottleneck, the communication is the gap. Once you figure out the input steps of it, then the next step is you need to remove all the useless activities that the bottleneck is doing. So in the input steps, you just figure out what are the other different things that they are doing and try to eliminate the useless things that they are doing, or the things that can be easily delegated, and ensure that the process is structured just to solve for the thing that where you're facing the bottleneck in. And finally, once you've removed the useless activities, try to automate as many parts of the activity as possible, because once you start automating it, the efficiency starts increasing and the flow rate over here starts increasing. The entire goal in the end is, what we need to do is we need to remove the bottleneck and make it something like this, such that whatever is flowing through this is never getting constricted over here, and it's always flowing equally everywhere. And that is how you make an efficient process. This is what we do at Modernizing Processes overall. We first identify and then eliminate, with a lot of reasoning in the middle. So that was how we solve for bottlenecks. Similarly, we'll talk about other process debts in the future as well.